The moratoriums are done. The final votes were June 28th. It goes into effect July 28th, these new frameworks. So we're on time at being late. But these are some of the most transformative changes to the framework of our regulatory process that we have seen since Shellman, Edwards, and Kinsley back in the 70s. And I am so proud to be part of this. It is big, it's complex. I'm going to distill it down for you, and I'm going to do it all through the lens of affordable housing because it is what I care about most, because I think it is the linchpin to having a full and successful community. Yes, these rules will make significant changes to neighborhood impacts, significant changes that improve our environment, our landfill. That was all part of it. But let's dig in from the affordable housing part. So first, we need to understand where our deficit in housing is coming from, right? Initially, the cause of the housing deficit was job creation in the commercial core. So an empty space of land got developed into a 3-story building. Now there's a bunch of employees there and they have nowhere to live. That was true roughly until about 1980, maybe 1990. Then we were fully built out. Right? If anything, we've been seeing a job loss in that core because automation, possibly, and when buildings get redeveloped because of new codes, they're going from 3 stories down to 2 stories, and so there are less employees. And yet, we are still having a harder and harder time with housing as we add more affordable. Why? It's in the residential sector. The condition there used to be you had an old home that would house a number of workers. It might have been free market, naturally occurring affordable, but it was older, it was cheaper, it was run down, or it was owned by the original owner. And so it housed a worker. And over time and increasingly, those projects have been scraped and they've been replaced. They've been replaced by generally one of two things. Either a short-term rental that operates effectively like a commercial lodge, or a $20 million spec home that is 68% of the time now a vacant investment property. So not only do we lose the workers that were once living in the old structure, but the structure in which it replaces now requires additional generation of employees to either manage that lodge use. Something I understand, I work in it. These aren't evil things, they're just part of the reality. You need a cleaner, you need a maintenance person, you need someone to install a new tub, or the vacant investment property, many of which have a full staff that cleans the floor every week, keeps the heat on, stocks the fridge with Perrier, even though no one's been there in 2 years. And so you've had this massive inequity happen where we've displaced local workers and increased jobs over here. So how do we work through that? Well, so the first thing we did is we looked at the short-term rentals. We picked 3 kind of different areas, and we said in 2 of those, you can have as much as you want. If you're owner-occupied, it's your primary residence, go rent your place. If you are in the place that was intended for this type of use, so what we're calling lodge, but along the mountain, commercial core, there's no limitation. Right? That's what those areas are for. That's fine. That activity can happen there. But for everything else, all the residential areas all around, we have new rules and restrictions. We've capped the number of STRs at 75% of their current number in those areas only. That number is, frankly, a little bit out of thin air. And it comes from a place of, at our peak, it feels like too much. And most, not all, but most would agree to that. And we know that there's a bunch of new lodge projects coming online, right? So it's going to get more. So, okay, let's start at 75%. And let's see how that feels. We can always change it, right? Everyone who has one's grandfathered in, but they are now non-transferable, which is a big deal because it reduces some of the speculation that we know categorically has been happening and artificially raising prices of properties. And who knows? On the edge cases, perhaps this will mean over time as those prices adjust and as we probably go through an adjustment from the COVID bubble as well, that maybe some more locals can buy free market properties. And I hope that that is the case. Maybe not, right? But we will, through attrition, people either not renting or selling their property come down to that 75% level, right? So now what we've done is we've made one of those alternative uses to housing a bit less attractive and less of a driver of the financial incentives that have kept local workers out of the marketplace. Okay, so now we go over to the other side. And effectively, what we're looking to do is we're looking at an equation, right? As a developer, if option one is building affordable housing, and option two is building that vacant, most likely, but not always, investment spec home, which one would I choose? And we've chosen this one every time for the last 40 years. And I should say, that's not all bad, right? STRs are not all bad. STRs are affordable lodging, they are vitality, they are people shopping in our community. I work in that field. But all STRs would be bad, right? We're seeking a balance. Same thing for vacant investment homes, right? Second homeowners put incredible amount of resources into our community. They bring intellectual capital, they bring culture, vigor. It's a beautiful part of this equation. But when it's only that, we become a country club, not a town. And the reason for them to be here and us to be here is nil, right? So we want to find that balance. What we've done is limited the number of demolitions of residential structures that can happen each year to 6, plus a special allotment of 2 for locals, right? This effectively makes it more challenging and frankly less predictable to do that type of development. At the same time, we've raised the mitigation for affordable housing to reflect the actual impact that these type of projects have. Historically, if you had a basement, which was often more than half the square footage of the house, garages, or a pre-exempted space. So if the old house was 3,000 square feet, the new house is 7, you were not required to mitigate for that 4,000, even if it was completely unmitigated before. Now you have to mitigate for all of that. So there's a much larger check that has to be written if you are going to be delivering that type of projects. So now it's become harder from a process standpoint to deliver them, and it's become more expensive. On the other side, what we want to see, we've made it easier and cheaper. So if you're building affordable housing, now, instead of going through a 3-year public firing squad, you have a straight line fast pass system to get that done. It's predictable and it saves you time, and time is money in that process. You can also now, by right, do affordable housing anywhere in the community in any residential zone district. So the area where these things can land has increased. If you do 100% affordable, you are not responsible for any of those new fees. They all get deferred. And if it's deed restricted, then you never have to pay them. So it's gotten cheaper. And lastly, we upzoned. So instead of just one door, you can have up to a 4-plex in residential neighborhoods, right? So we've created a new framework to incentivize what we want and disincentivize what we don't want. Now, even though we've done that, the delta, this bit, financially is still significant, right? The incentive is still to build that spec house. And we want to see people getting rich, developing what the community needs. And frankly, every developer I have talked to without exception shares the same values we have and wants that same mix of community. We want to put dollars in their pocket doing it. So the next steps are to create new funding streams to do that, right? There's a short-term rental tax. We're out polling on it now. Hopefully it's on in November. If you pass that, that will be additional revenue. And then I think later we need to be looking at vacancy. I was a very strong supporter of a vacancy tax until COVID hit. And then I had to question some of those assumptions. I'm still questioning them, but in balance, 68% of our free market homes today are vacant. That is still the single biggest problem, but we'll look at that later, 23, 24. But imagine that we raise that tax too. Now we have 2 new revenue streams. What do we do with those? We build a development neutral program, a program that delivers affordable housing easily, quickly, all over our community for all different income types without having any new development. So how does that work? 1, buy down program. If you've been priced out of the market for a 1-bedroom, we go to you and say, hey, we'll give you X% of that sale price, put it for your buy down, or put some of it in the bank. Even in exchange, you give us a forever deed restriction. Now we have a brand new affordable housing property, 0 new development, and you've stayed in our community rather than move to Carbondale. Then we turn to the development community and we say, hey, there's that piece of land right there. You want to scrape and replace that. It's going to take you 5 years to build a free market vacant home or an STR, or we'll give you X% to buy the land. You guarantee to us you're going to replace that with a 100% affordable project, right? It's by right. You don't have any of those other fees. You go do it, and within a year, we have a new project. Now we're cooking with gasoline, right? Because now affordable housing projects start popping up all over the community by developers, not by us, who are making good money to deliver that. And if we're smart and we have all those products from category 1 through RO, which is a critical part to refill that missing middle for those who have been recently priced out over the last 10 years, but especially during the COVID spike, well, now we have stepping stones where people can move up and down the system. They're not trapped in their income, and we rebuild some of that community fabric and continuity where we are not just a community of have-nots and haves, but we have everything. That's the vision that these things entail. This is an incredibly transformative framework, and I'm proud to be part of it. Let's see how it goes over the next couple of years. Thank you for being with me.